Hey, Richard, it's been a few days now. Are you still feeling liberated?
Oh, I feel free. That's one thing Donald Trump just does in spades, isn't it? He
Yeah.
just walks around the world handing out freedom. Yeah, look, I mean, like so much Trump, he's so good at attracting attention. He's so good at drawing the eye and
Mm.
resetting the narrative. But, really, what he says is so much more terrific than what he does. And yeah, his big tariffs are a real problem. Don't get me wrong, we can talk about why, but impacts on Australia will be quite small in the short term.
Mm.
The real problem for Australia is that America's a big part of the world economy, and if Trump wrecks the American economy, it has an impact on the global economy, and that affects us. But there's a lot of other ways beyond tariffs that Trump can wreck the American economy, and he's working on them too.
Yeah, him and his team are working pretty hard on them. But I mean, as you say, Trump's so good at kind of sucking all the air out of the room, and that means there's been all this noise and heat around the tariffs. Can you explain, like, I guess, what the fallout actually is? You mentioned that they could be a big problem, or they are a big problem. What is the actual fallout as opposed to the speculation about the fallout?
Yeah, well, let's talk about what a tariff is first. Like, it's a tax on imports. All right. Now, Trump has kind of convinced himself and convinced a whole bunch of people in America that the rest of the world was kind of taking the piss from America and ripping them off. Well, let's just sort of start with Economics 101. Trade is voluntary exchange. Like, no one's holding a gun to anyone's head. Why countries trade is the same reason that individuals trade, and that is that someone else has something that you want and you'd rather buy it off them than do it yourself. So I don't grow many carrots, I don't make a lot of homemade pasta. It's a long time since I built a stereo from scratch, right? So I trade with the world every day, and I hopefully provide services that some people value, and then with the money they give me, I go and buy stuff from other people. But the whole point of trade is it's voluntary. Now, to get to America, what's going on here? Americans have been buying lots of Australian beef. You know why? Because it was good and it was cheap. That's why the Americans were buying Australian beef, because Americans looked and went, where can I get beef? And they could grow it in America, or they could buy it from other countries, or they could buy it from Australia. And a bunch of freedom-loving Americans free chose to buy some beef off Australians. Now, what Trump's come along and done is the opposite of freedom. He's kind of said, hey, freedom-loving Americans who are freedomly buying Australian beef, I'm going to put a tax on beef that crosses the border. Now, what that means is the price of American hamburgers is going to go up. All right, this is no doubt about this. Americans are going to pay more for hamburgers and more for French fries, even if they're not from France. And they're going to pay more for cars and more for stereos. That's an American problem. They're going to pay more for stuff. And does it have an impact on Australia? Well, yeah, a little bit. The first round effect, as an economist would say, is, well, at the moment, Americans were buying some of our beef. It's now going to get 10% dearer. So the Americans will buy probably less, but not no beef off us. So our beef exports to America will fall a bit. But you know what we'll do with the beef that we're not selling to America? We'll sell it to someone else. Right? Because it's not like the Americans were the only people who were freedomly buying our beef. So, America's going to be 10% worse off. And, Australian beef exporters might be 1 or 2% worse off, because they're just going to sell the beef to the second highest bidder. The highest bidder used to be the Americans. They don't want our beef. All right, well, we'll sell it to the Koreans, or we'll sell it to the Chinese, or we'll sell it to someone else. So it will have an impact, but it won't have a big impact on us. The big impact on us is if America kind of tanks the world economy with a giant trade war about everything, well, then we'll sell less iron ore to China if China's selling less cars made out of our iron ore, or less fridges made out of iron ore. And that's down the track, but that's the bigger risk, not the impact on beef exports.
Yeah, right. And like Richard, we've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, that it is that silly, isn't it? Like it's the misunderstanding of basic economics is so bad, but that sits alongside this being actually really quite risky and dangerous. And so it makes it, I don't know about you, but it makes it really hard to talk about because you're talking about something simultaneously so ridiculous and so dangerous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous economics with potentially serious consequences. Look, I think the thing to understand about Donald Trump, the thing to understand about a lot of populist right-wing leaders, including Peter Dutton in Australia, is that what they're actually trying to do is cause problems, not fix them. Right? And I think progressives need to get their head around this. We're like, I'm not even sure that will really work. It's like, pull out a textbook. I think they've misunderstood the theory that sits behind what they're saying. They know, okay? They know they're not stupid. They're just saying stupid things. So what Trump is trying to do is say, I'm on America's side. I'm on America's side. Watch me tax foreigners. I'm on America's side. And for people who are too busy or just not interested in politics or don't have the time or don't even speak enough English to go and dig into a lot of what Trump's saying, they're hearing the meta message loud and clear. I'm on America's side, I'm taxing foreigners. And then if Trump puts America into recession, he'll just blame unions, right? He'll just blame state Democrat governors or... you got to get your head around these people aren't trying to fix problems. They're trying to cause problems. They're trying to draw lines of us and them. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't call out the absurdity of the economics, but in calling out the absurdity of the economics, we have to simultaneously push further in and say, so what are these people doing? Because it's just comforting to say they're dumb. They're not dumb. They're just not trying to solve the problem that you think they should be trying to solve.
Yeah, and I mean, I would take that further as well and say that the politics of it is not straightforward either, because in so much of the commentary, there's this inbuilt assumption that, exactly as you say, these tariffs are likely to raise prices in the United States. And then the assumption about that is that will have immediate political fallout for Trump. There's talk about bloodbath at the midterms and how, inflation got Joe Biden. And so, of course, it's going to get Donald Trump as well. And I think this is what you were partly getting at. I don't think the politics of it is that straightforward, especially in support for Trump, because his supporters, his base, is very good at redirecting blame. As you said, he's so good at redirecting blame and good at almost kind of memory holing the worst effects of the Trump administration. Is that the way that you see it, or do you think that the politics of it is actually that straightforward when it comes to the impact of economics on people's political decision making?
No, I think you're spot on. I think that the economics is straightforward. The politics are so much more complicated than I think what a lot of Democrat strategists in America can comprehend. Trump is fueled by other people's anger. Trump is a step ahead in the redirection of that anger and the blaming of someone else. So if he makes inflation worse and he makes people angrier, Politics 101 says, the angry people will then blame Donald Trump. Ha-ha. And then the Democrats will step in and offer a plausible alternative.
Well,
yeah. That might happen. Or actually, Trump does some rage harvesting and goes to his base and says, inflation's gone up and it's that person over there's fault, or that's why we have to crack down on some immigrants further, or I don't know, he's better at this than me. Like, that's my insight, understand that this guy is playing a different game. And he's about to cause inflation. Yes, he's about to slow economic growth. Yes, he's probably going to push the world economic growth down. How much, well, we'll see, but no one thinks he's going to push it up. All that's going to happen, and that's bad. But the idea that he'll then put his hand up, do a mea culpa, and say, whoopsie, it turns out the Democrats were better economic managers than me all along, allow me to recalibrate. Like, in what world are people planning for that?